rotated. Sorry, give me a minute.
Yeah. This is the first time we have equipment to do this. So
Yikes. Excuse the... There we are.
you got it?
I believe so.
Ready?
Yep.
Right. Good evening. Welcome. This is the ACT monthly meeting. Thank you for coming. Here, my name is Sunil Dasgupta. I am an ACT board member, and I am this year's organizer of the speaker series that we will do. If you have ideas, please send them my way. If you want to speak, please, I'm always looking for speakers. First, if you are not yet an ACT member, please sign up to be. Definitely, please sign up that we appreciate. We are a membership-based organization, and the larger our numbers, the more effective we are together. Before we start, what we usually do is we allow everybody in the audience to quickly introduce themselves. So, again, my name is Sunil Dasgupta. I live in Aspen Hill. Sometimes I have to drive. Most of the time I have to drive down here. I would love to take more transit.
Hi everyone, my name is Amy Frieder. I live in Rockville, and I don't have a car, so I take transit everywhere I go. I like to bike, I like to run, and I'm a board member in this organization as well.
Hello, I'm Matthew Butler. I've been nominated to be secretary for ACT. I live in California, and I come from Parks, so
Hold on, Sean. You go in a minute.
John from Bruce. I live in Silver Spring, and I try to bike a lot.
Sean?
Sean Robertson. I live in Kensington, and I'm a member of ACT Board as well.
Go ahead.
John Fay, I live in Wheaton. I'm Tim Soderquist, I live in Four Corners, and I'm very excited about the meeting.
Excellent.
Dan Reed, both an ACT board member a long time ago. I'm John Emerson, I live in Silver Spring.
I'm Sheila Emerson.
Ben Ross in Bethesda. Andrew Dashner, Silver Spring. Mark Poster, live a couple blocks from here and own an EV. Mike Larkin, here in Silver Spring.
Tina Slater, I live close to the Wayndale Purple Line Station, 4 years away.
I'm Chris Farrell. I live in the Kentville section, came on the number 9 bus.
Charles Ginsburg, I live in Kensington. I'm very fortunate to be well served by public transit.
Richard Hoy, Bethesda.
All right. So, following that, we're going to do some issue updates quickly. One of the most hot issues is the bike lanes on Old Georgetown. And Matthew Sadler, who's one of our board members, is going to give you a quick update about what's going on. Matthew?
So the situation with Old Georgetown Road is that a portion of it has been replaced by the State Highway Administration, and they've enacted a road diet, which means the road is more narrow. They've added a bicycle lane. They've added other safety features like high visibility, crosswalks, and flex posts. This stretch is pretty dangerous. Between like 2014 and 2018, there have been over 300 crashes. There was a boy in June who was killed on a bicycle a few years ago. There was another teenager who was still on his bicycle. So this would seem like a sensible and mild reform, that there's been pushback in Bethesda from motorists. So these motorists have created a petition on change.org. It has like about 7,000 signatures. Yeah, so their main grievance is that it slows traffic. So they want people to drive through there faster. They're saying that about 20, 30 minutes to their commute. I think the study says it's only been 5 minutes that have been added to the commute. So there's a counter petition right now. It only has like 2,000 or 3,000 signatures. So if you haven't signed it, please. You can do it on your phone.
Where can we find the petition?
So it's on change.org, and also there was an email sent out.
Yeah, an email was sent out. And what I would do is I would take out emails and email you the petition after the meeting.
Thank you.
So you will have that.
We have to get more than 7,000. And on Sunday there was also a bike-in in Bethesda where there was I think it was I wasn't able to go, but I saw
More than
photos.
100 bikers.
100 bicyclists, several dozen
Yeah, like
were there as well.
40 walkers. I was there.
So that's the situation.
Thank you. Whenever this kind of thing happens, I like to say the names of the people that have died. 4 people have died on Old Georgetown since 2018. Donna Sisi Amara Sekara, who was a child care provider. Michael O'Connor, who was a construction worker. Jake Castle, teenager on a bike. And Enzo Alvarenga, teenager on a bike. Ben, you want to talk about it? Yep.
Yeah. Just a very brief update on the toll lanes. The governor Hogan has now definitively failed to get it approved in his term. They gave an extension until the end of March for Transurban, the private company, to come up with its detailed proposal. So now the big question is what the new Governor Moore will do. And he has said, which somewhat typically for him, his pronouncements have not been very specific. But he has said very clearly that he doesn't like the existing plan and we need something different. He has also said he wants to do something. And there are various vibrations out there. I think the most positive vibration was the statement he gave at the committee for Montgomery last month, but wants to do something that will build highway. But I have to say we are pretty optimistic because it's clear that the pay for itself with tolls has collapsed. It will take state money. And when they actually look at this thing in detail with a new transportation secretary, any construction alternative has big downsides and very few upsides. And there are so many other things that they could spend money on in the state that would be much more useful. So this is not settled at all, but we're feeling cautiously optimistic.
Wait a minute, could we ask questions?
Yeah, sure.
What's the plans to propose for the alternative use of funds and state efforts that might be more appealing to this governor?
Well, there's lots of things.
The red line.
The red line in Baltimore, Southern Maryland Light Rail, ARC expansion. They've been very clear that they want to move ahead with both Southern Maryland
followed the previous planning board. But we spoke to Natalie Gonzalez, who's now on the county council, and previously served on the planning board, about how important it is that people like us, people who care about transit-oriented development and want to see through, thrive, and really, want to put those visions into action, actually serve on the planning board. So I know there's at least one person in this room who applied before and is very qualified, and I hope they apply again. But the more people who apply, who care about the issues that we do, the more likely that some of us may get appointed. So I know it's very challenging because being a member of the planning board requires being available on Thursdays. So you have to have a flexible job situation or an employer who's willing to let you do that. But if you have any questions, about that, or you're not sure if it, if you would, have the ability to do that, if you apply, you might be able to figure that out later. It's a pretty competitive process, but I'd like to encourage you all to apply.
Thanks, Amy.
Sunil, are you gonna apply?
I am not going to apply.
Can we conscript you?
Yeah, well, talk to my wife first. Okay, the last thing of business-wise we have before we turn to our marquee speaker is that we have elections. We had last month, ACT's nominating committee submitted the following slate for the 2023 ACT board positions. The nominations were accepted by at the December 2022 ACT membership meeting, and no additional nominations were made. The nominees are Amy Frieder as president, Nick Brand as treasurer, Matthew Sadler as secretary, Miriam Schonbaum as vice president for pedestrian and bicycle safety, Sean Robertson, vice president for online and comms, James Hedrick, vice president for housing, and me, Sunil Dasgupta, board member for speakers. Yes, and I'm sorry. Yeah. Paul made a mistake with his note to me. Chris Farrell, who's a board member who is going to look closely at the Beltway and 270 related issues. Okay, and with that, we are ready. Tonight's speakers. Pardon me? Oh, vote. Of course. I'm sorry, I have not done this before. There's specific language I've been asked. Attendees at tonight's membership meeting are now asked to vote on whether to approve the nominees. So if you all yea, please raise your hand. All right, I think it's unanimous now. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Sean Emerson, our speaker today, is the architect of the Emerson Smooth Better BRT plan for Route US 29. A native of the Four Corners area of Silver Spring, Sean now lives in Gaithersburg, where he's chair of Gaithersburg Transportation Committee. He is a former blogger who worked for 6 years as a legislative aide, first at the Maryland General Assembly and then at the County Council. He has served on ACT's board and on the Greater Greater Washington Editorial Board. He currently works for Montgomery Parks. Sean?
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks again, Sunil, for inviting me. Really great to be here, great to be back. I've not been to an in-person ACT meeting in a while, so it's cool to see some familiar faces again, so I appreciate being here. Today I'm here to talk about bus rapid transit on Route 29, which is a topic I think many of you are probably aware of, something I've been involved in pretty deeply for about 8 years now. And yeah, as the intro said, I, along with the help of many others, designed a medium bus lane for the corridor that is now getting implemented. So, away we go. All right, so I guess we'll start off with a quick timeline of the events. Some of you may be familiar with bus rapid transit on 29 and the backstory there, but I think it would help those who may not be to just do a brief history of it. So the most recent history started in 2013. The county council passed a master plan that called for a whole network of BRT lines across the county. Route 29 is just one of many lines that was called for, but it was seen as a priority because the council wanted to encourage investment in eastern Montgomery County. So the planning for the Route 29 line itself began in 2014. Summer 2014 is when I started to get involved, which I'll speak to more in a moment. When I designed the bus lane for the first time, that was ultimately adopted. I joined the committee that the county made. The county created these various committees for citizen input on each corridor. So the one I joined was called the Route 29 Corridor Advisory Committee. I joined that with a few other people here, such as Dan. We were the first meeting together. So we went to that, and then summer 2015, I drew a bus lane in 3D to try and make it a little more sellable, easier for people to understand. And later on in this presentation, we'll have some 3D models I'll show you all. I brought to the CAC facilitators, the people from Montgomery County Department of Transportation, other agencies around the CAC at the time. They did not pursue my idea at the time, so I kind of just put it on the shelf for a while. Until 2017, when I met Sebastian at a gathering at Tina's house, an ACT gathering, and he encouraged me to bring it directly to the county council, which we then did. And thankfully the council received it very well. They ordered MCODOT to do a study of it, which happened. It took a few years for that all to get itself worked out, but by fall of this past year, the council basically locked in the plan for a median bus lane on 29, discarding some of the other options that had been considered. I was talking a bit about the growth of the corridor. This is a Briggs Chain area back in 1958. That's Route 29, just going diagonal there in white. It's black and white picture. Roads concrete, so it's white. There was a lot of development on this whole corridor, starting in the early 60s, really going through the 90s. Much of it actually had to do with the Ag Reserve. There was these things called transferable development rights, and it meant that a lot more density got built farther from Metro than otherwise would have happened. And the thought was that that new density would be served by some kind of high quality transit. Maybe not Metro, but something like light rail or bus rapid transit. But the idea was very vague at the time. So that's what the area looks like now. You see it changed quite a bit. While all this was getting built, the plan for some kind of high capacity transit never really got anywhere. So over about 40 or 50 years, all of this, which is supposed to be transit oriented development of a sort, the transit part was missing.
Well, there's a lot more missing in that picture.
Yeah. All right, so I guess the existing conditions on Route 29 today. This is what most of the corridor looks like, at least north of Sligo Creek Parkway. It's got 3 lanes each way with the median, and that median is often broken by a turn pocket of one kind or another. And narrow sidewalks right up on the road. And this is what essentially my median bus lane tank calls for. Fitting a bus lane within the existing footprint of the road, which is very important, as we'll talk about in a moment, to fit it in there without doing a bunch of property takings or extensive widening. All right, so there were some early attempts, like I mentioned, to do true transit on this corridor in the past 30 or so years. In the 90s, there was a whole study commissioned by the county to look at a busway on 29. The results of which look eerily similar to what I ultimately drew, although It's funny, this study, that's a screenshot from it there. People forgot it existed. We had heard reference of it, me and Sebastian, and as we were advocating for the median lane, we discovered that this existed, and we talked to a council staff named Glenn Orland who had to go to some retired person's house and scan it and upload it. So that's how you can see it, but it was on some guy's shelf for 20 years. But this was an attempt to do a bus route on 29 back in, I think, 1996. But unfortunately, it did not go anywhere. But then, by the 2010s, early 2010s, some progress was made. Like I said, the council at the time passed a whole countywide plan for BRT, of which 29 was a component. And that really got the momentum going again for bus rapid trans on 29. It sort of cemented the idea that this will be the mode we choose rather than look at things like Metro and Light Rail, which are seen as less doable for the corridor. Not everyone was on board. That's kind of right. So I grew up in Four Corners, lived there my whole life till I was 22. Not that far from 29. And when the council passed that plan, the whole BRT thing became a very hot topic in the neighborhood. Tons of opposition to it from all the local civic groups, including the one that is in my neighborhood, and very, very vitriolic at times. And it was folks in this area that had also kind of quelled, squashed plans for earlier improvements of various kinds, both transit and road. So that was sort of the context in which I kind of got involved. So yeah, early 2014, I actually joined ACT right around this time as well. I started a local blog, it's called Around the Corners, and I talked about a lot of things. It's kind of like a local blog, but transit was one of them. And because this was such a hot topic at the time, and it's the topic of all the discourse in the neighborhood, I started following the BRT issue pretty closely thereafter. And yeah, a lot of the opposition about it was the real main talking point from the opponents is that it was going to result in widespread destruction of the neighborhood. That it would tear down the Woodward Shopping Center, the bakery would go away, it would tear down the pet store, the 7-Eleven, which isn't a great loss, but some other things. It was going to be a tsunami through the middle of Four Corners and just destroy everything. That was the thought. So when I heard that, I was kind of suspicious. I didn't think that would occur, so I started to kind of just look around at how a bus lane could fit on 29. My background at the time, I was in college. I was a sophomore. I was studying both political science and geographic information systems, which is mainly just mapping of various kinds. I worked at a GIS lab on my college campus. I used the tools a lot. It was also just a hobby of mine to do GIS stuff. I draw things for fun in there all the time. So I just started playing around in Google Earth initially, just seeing how I could fit a bus lane into the median of the corridor. Started drawing it, and I found out pretty quickly that it was very doable without taking even one building. This is the corridor I focused on. Sliding Creek Parkway up to Burnt Mills. North of Burnt Mills, Route 29 widens out a bit. It becomes a bit more like a freeway. BRT is not as controversial up there for that reason. There's just more room to work with. And then south of Sliding Creek Parkway, the road gets narrower, and there's not many options to do something simple down there into downtown Silver Spring. But this key corridor between Sliding Creek and Burnt Mills is where the heaviest volumes are, because you got the Beltway there, and you have the intersection of Emerson Boulevard, which is very busy. One of the busiest ones in the state, actually. So I focused on this corridor because I thought these roughly 4 miles are where the real trouble spot is. That's where the traffic is. That's where all the delays happen for the existing bus service. So this is what I drew. I started out drawing it in 2D in 2014. Like I said, about a year later in 2015, I decided to draw it in 3D. Used a program called SketchUp, just like a 3D modeling software. And I drew how the bus lane could fit on the corridor, and I just geo-referenced it into Google Earth so you could view it in real scale against the real map as if it was there. So that's what I drew, and at the time, like I said, I was on the corridor advisory committee. So I was one of these, there were about 40 of us on the committee, I think. And I attempted to kind of bring it to the leaders of that committee who worked for MCDOT and other agencies. The state was involved back then, and they didn't really bite on the idea. So here are just a few other kind of screenshots of it. Like I said, end of that summer, I kind of emailed it all to the facilitators, and they thought it was kind of a cool drawing, but they didn't really have any appetite to advance it at all. Like I said, at that time, the topic was so controversial, and by now it's about 2 years into sort of the height of the controversy, that the county was clearly kind of looking to water down the system to take away the controversial parts that were the dedicated lane. The dedicated lane was seen as the most controversial component because people thought it involved either widening or sacrificing travel lanes. So by then, even in 2015, I could tell they're kind of going towards that watered down route, which explains why the CAC people were not, the facilitators were not really interested in pursuing it. All right, so yeah, like I said, 2016, 2017, the county council pretty much fully watered down BRT to a system called Flash, which is running on the road today. It runs largely in mixed traffic, or at least in mixed traffic where it matters. It can run on the shoulders up north of Tech Road. Up there, the traffic is not much of an issue, so it's not much of a gain. But then everything south of Tech Road into downtown Silver Spring, which is about 6 miles, it's just in traffic like any other bus. And in fact, when Flash was created, some of the express Metrobus routes on the corridor went away, so it was an improvement. The stations are nicer, but it was kind of a one-to-one replacement in terms of actual transit vehicles on the street a given day. So it really was quite a downgrade from the very robust, ambitious plan of 2013 to by 2017 we got this. All right, so yeah, I kind of put the idea on the shelf for a while because I guess thought, okay, like county's going to Flash, they're not going to do dedicated lanes, whatever. I'll just do other stuff. I started working by this time too, so I just focused on other things. But I then met my friend Sebastian early 2017, right at the beginning of the year, and he lives out 29, out the corridor in East County, and we were talking about the plan and BRT, and I showed him these drawings, and he said, why don't you bring this directly to the county council and just show it to them and see what they think of it. And then my first thought was, well, I never thought to do that, I guess, because I tried to go through the official channels, but I thought, you know, the ship may have sailed, might be a little bit late, because it looks like they're about to approve this whole Flash network, and I think they'll think it's cool, but they'll probably say, well, we already decided what to do. But still, we scheduled some meetings anyway to see how it went. That's one of the pictures Sebastian took. He brought some Legos as a visual aid. I don't know if you see that there. I thought it was a little gimmicky, but it worked very well. They loved it, more so than the actual detailed drawing. So, yeah, Sebastian, I met with, I think, 8 of the 9 council members one-on-one, all in April of 2017. Walked each of them through the idea, you know, showed it to them. They did like it. They liked it a lot. Nancy Florine, to her credit, scheduled a follow-up meeting with us only about 2 weeks later with then Director of MCDOT, Al Rochier, and at the time, Deputy Director Chris Conklin, who's now the Director. And we walked them through the idea kind of segment by segment. And basically, MCDOT told the council, because this is when the council is doing budget, they do budget every spring. And the council looked at doing it as part of the budget, but MCDOT basically said, you know, we're just going to do this as part of our existing funding. We think we can do this without needing like a special appropriation. So at the time, yeah, because we met with them one-on-one, we did get some praise for it. So Sebastian dug up some of these quotes. These are all, you can watch the video, it's all online. But yeah, we got some praise for the idea. Belinda was a big fan of it. Said some nice things about it. As was someone named Mark Elrich, who was an at-large council member at the time, now the county executive. He also found it to be a very helpful thing that we drew it to show that it could actually fit, rather than sort of, you know, watching the statements we got. There was a bit of a hiccup in DOT kind of doing it themselves, like they told us. So in, I think February or March of 2018, we did have to go back to the council, at a public hearing, and actually request that funding be allocated for the study, which we did. So basically everyone in that picture testified, and that's when the actual study got funded. So it took about a year when we first met with them and showed it to them to when the money was actually allocated and DOT could get started on the study. And it was MCDOT who shepherded the study the whole way. They're the lead agency. All right. Yeah, it's called the Route 29 Mobility and Reliability Study. Took DOT about a year and a half to come up with their preliminary results. And their initial results were not that great. They had kind of done an apples and oranges comparison between the median lane and a few other alternatives that they had thought of. And the council was just not happy with it, so they more or less told MCDOT to go back and do it again, or at least redo sizable parts of the study. And so DOT said, okay, sure. And in doing that, they also considered what was originally just a study to be kind of preliminary planning at that stage. So they said, all right, we'll both do a study, but then we'll also do some kind of preliminary engineering and design work so that whatever results from the study is kind of ready to go on to the next step pretty quickly. So that was kind of part of the arrangement they worked out with the council at the time. Again, in 2020, this is the, while this is happening, the Flash system went into service, which again is almost entirely mixed traffic, although it does have some nice bus stops along the corridor. And yeah, just south of Tech Road through that main heavily trafficked corridor, it's all in the regular lanes, just all the other cars, which is kind of that's the opposite of BRT. This is what it would look like with a better BRT. You'd have a dedicated lane pretty much all the way in, including through the congested corridor, so it definitely adds several more miles of dedicated lane that are just not there today. Alrighty. Alright, so by 2022, by really just this past fall, MCDOT had completed their study, Route 29 Mobility Reliability Study. They basically narrowed it down to three options. I think there's two, because being no build is never really an option. There was the median lane and what they called a managed lane, and then there's just no build. So obviously my median lane, we know what that is, we saw the drawings, but their managed lane idea was kind of this idea for like an HOV lane by time of day with overhead lighted up signs above it, kind of like the reversible lanes on 29 right now. But it would say at certain times of day the left travel lane is only for buses and HOV cars. There are some systems like this on interstates where they work well because it's a limited access highway where they can work well. But 29 is called an arterial road, which just means like it's a surface street with intersections and driveways and lots of turning movements. It's way harder to keep the different types of traffic separated on a road like that because it doesn't have the kind of controlled access that an interstate would. But regardless, MCOD brought this up as kind of their alternative to the median lane. And it looked really good in their computer models because none of the sims break the law in the model. So and there's no lawlessness at all. It's a great utopia, SimCity. So this is kind of a comparison of the three. The one on the right is just the DOT alternative, which is a managed lane. And as you can see, it would be in that kind of HOV style lane for much of the corridor. And then, on the left there, or in the middle, is our plan, which is obviously dedicated most of the way through. And then the left is just kind of existing conditions where north of Tech Road, you can drive on the shoulder, so it's kind of a dedicated lane, but not really. All right, so the recommendations went before the planning board and the temporary board. This is after the situation. And the planning board voted in favor of the median lane. A lot of this was helped to the staff report, which strongly recommended the median lane, my idea, over the managed lane, basically because it achieved the goals of the 2013 plan. The planning staff report critics said a median bus lane was always meant to be what was going to happen on the corridor. It's the type of robust transit we want. It's not something watered down, and it's in keeping with what is now a 9-year-old plan. So we were very happy to see that, and then it shortly went to the county council. Just for a quick comparison, so I had drawn this in 2015, and I'm not an engineer or anything or an architect. I just know how to measure things with Google Earth, which is not that hard. And I had drawn this in 2015, and that was kind of my design. That was how I kind of threaded it through 4 corners. So I got the glare down there, and the shopping center and all that. That's what I drew, and then as part of, like I said, that study process, what DOT came up with had already had some preliminary design done to it. So what they presented to the planning board and the council this past fall was kind of a very doable design, was the point. It wasn't something that had to be worked on a lot. And that's what DOT came up with. It's the same, pretty much. They did a few small things, like their timberwood there, but that's about it. Everything else is nearly identical. So I think this study total cost like over $1 million, and they kind of just got to what I drew in 2015.
And,
So,
and
at least
your-
they got there.
And what was your share of that?
Zero. I got none. Yeah, that's usually how it works. All right, so you can success. Huh? I wish I did. All right.
Even 10%.
Yeah, so less than a month after the planning board approved it, the county council just, I think it was on December 2nd, it was actually the last meeting of the council that just went out of office. They voted unanimously to approve the median lane for Route 29. So it's not a big milestone because it locks in that a median lane will happen. It kind of takes away the question of what will happen on the corridor. It's more now of an if and when type of question, which is great. Up until this point, there's always some question mark about, what kind of transit will Route 29 get? Will it be some kind of mixed traffic bus or whatever? With this decision, they cemented that it's going to be a median lane, at least through this corridor. But the battle's not over yet. There's actually a little bit more work to do. So right now what's funded is called preliminary engineering, and that goes through basically the end of fiscal year 24, which is halfway through calendar year 2024. After that is done, it'll be ready for detailed engineering and construction, which are going to kind of happen one right after another. But that has to get funding allocated, which is not there yet. So next budget season, next spring and summer, 2024, so a year after this one, will definitely be, that'll be an ask of, I think, transit advocates. I hope we'll have some support for getting this put into the capital improvement program, the CIP, to actually get it funded for final design, which is like blueprint ready, and then you can go out there and build it. So based on what DOT has told us, I think the most optimistic scenario is that it could be finished by 2030, and optimistic. But that's, hopefully we can get that funding about a year from now. All right, and also they are looking at doing an expansion to Howard County, which is a part of this that might have some utility. The county is looking at, Montgomery County is looking at expanding Flash up into Howard. Obviously, if this dedicated lane happens, it just offers even more utility to the system to just provide a reliable trip throughout. And just some thank yous here at the end. Those are all the folks who testified at that 2018 hearing, so some of your names are on there, thank you. And I got your name shouts to my friend Dan. Samaya, who's a former Maryland Baptist organizer for Culture Smarter Growth. He was heavily involved in this for about 5 years. And Jay Lyons, who did a great job after him picking up that role. And of course, Sebastian Smoot, who without him, this would probably still be sitting on this computer, and nobody else would really had access to it. I would have never brought the idea to the council if he had not urged you to do so. So thanks to all of them. I appreciate the support, and happy to answer any questions.
So, first of all, congratulations. I live in Woodmore, so I know all about the controversy and how people think it's going to destroy them. And it won't. So, at a public meeting in October, the manager of the mobility project, he was saying that their intention is not to narrow lanes. And one of the ways that you're doing this is by narrowing lanes. But what he's saying is, at least, going forward, there's no plan for narrow lane. And I think that whether they can or can't do that, it's important for traffic calming, slowing cars down, making it more easier to walk, and making sure sidewalks can be wider. It leads to another thing. It says that there's no money for bicycle and pedestrian improvements until fiscal year 25. And so what I want to advocate for, what I'm concerned I don't know how to do, is to ensure that when they do their initial engineering design, that we either encourage them to narrow lane widths and to build it or design it thinking about pedestrians and bicyclists, even if there's no money for improvements, which may be near the right of way too, not necessarily in it. So how do we do that? Make sure that they're organically including bicyclists, pedestrians, not just thinking of a high-speed roadway for buses.
Yeah. So the question was, will the existing car lanes be narrowed a bit to accommodate the busway, and then will there be commensurate improvements for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure to accompany the busway if and when it happens? To answer your first question, answer about Corey.
Right.
He may have been asked to answer a question from somebody saying, "Are you going to make it Connecticut Avenue narrow or something like that?" Because this will involve narrowing the lanes. Right now, all the travel lanes are 29 north of Sligo are between 11 and 12 feet wide. A little bit of variation, but they're all at least that wide right now. Curb to curb width of the road is about 84 feet right now. This busway fits within it in that footprint. That was the whole point of it. And you guys can see by that drawing DOT made, they're not, even they don't call for widening the road. I mean, you can just tell where all the existing frontages are. I mean, even the parking spots are still right where they are. So they will narrow the lanes a little bit. So I'm not sure what he was referring to. Maybe it's some other.
Yeah, well, he said it, the engineers there said it, and I saw another YouTube video of another meeting where they were talking about it. But one thing they say is that, you know, along the shopping center there's sort of a fourth lane. I don't know what you call it, kind of a merge lane, but they're saying that's gonna go away.
Yeah, to become part of the main lanes,
right,
yeah.
and they do, and there's a garage right next to, in Burton Mills, right next to Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
An older building that fronts the highway, they plan on taking that. So I was wondering if you're doing this by not narrowing the lanes, so. But it's good to know that is.
Maybe about, okay, like, where do we have some flexibility, where can we do something that preserves a property or building or something like that. So that will all get addressed as part of the detailed design phase. I had not focused so much as the part north of Burnt Mills right there, because that's where it gets a little bit wider.
Right.
It's talking about Burnt Mills Auto Body, I know the place.
Yeah.
It depends. There's room there on that west side of the road by what used to be Choice Hotels. So again, during detailed design, they can look at creative stuff like that. Like we just shifted 3 feet, and that way you don't have to take that. As for the pedestrian and bike safety stuff to accompany it, if this does get funded, it'll be a pretty major project. I mean, it'll be reconstructing actually the whole road, going through this whole corridor. Again, during that more detailed phase, I think they'll identify any bike or pedestrian improvements that'll come with it. One part of this plan would involve adding at least a couple new traffic signals, probably as many as 4, depending on if they keep them in. And then almost all of those will be crosswalks. I wanted one here at Timberwood, but they show it as not being there right now, but hopefully that gets put back in.
The last I heard, Timberwood, it definitely includes one at Timberwood.
Well, signal, yes, but crosswalk maybe.
Oh, really? They'll do a signal without a crosswalk?
Well, that's what they have drawn here, yeah. So we'll see if they add that back in. But there are going to be more traffic lights, which will make it a lot safer to cross. Like right now, if you want to cross south of the Arc near Blair High School, the next traffic light to cross that is way down at Franklin. It's like 3/4 of a mile away. So under this would be more frequent traffic lights for crossing. Hopefully, that would just tame the road a bit too. I love it because the sidewalk's wider, but there's property there is very tight. It's part of the reason for this. So.
See, what I thought it's important to narrow the lanes between Burn Mills and Four Corners intersection.
Yeah.
Cars, people do 50 miles an hour pretty commonly there. So biking up, people are afraid to bike and walk up and down.
Oh,
so if
why
you
don't
want people to walk to BRT, you got to make it possible to do that.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I was going to ask if you knew where the traffic lights were going to go.
If I knew?
Yeah.
Oh, where the traffic lights? Yeah, as far as I know, they'll do Timberwood, Hastings / Granville, like the YMCA entrance, Crestmore, more likely than not, and maybe one south of Granville before Franklin, so like between Indian Spring and North Hills, like it's like Layton Avenue or something. Maybe one there.
Happening. The sign already for the one in Granville Road.
Yeah, that was a plan for a while.
Yeah.
SHA kind of sat on it. Hopefully that does happen. Again, what I designed is I wasn't a done deal yet, so there's one there, but that one would probably happen way before this gets built. So. Yeah.
I have a few questions. One is, did the study show whether there will be a net reduction in the number of vehicles on the road as a result? I know that the county's growing, but will this at least offset to some degree the amount of vehicles? And also, will there be parking? I mean, what about the issue of parking? Because do you anticipate most people are just going to walk to the bus stations? And finally, and that's a related question, how do you get, if it's in the median, how do you get to the bus?
Good. Got all these about 8 years ago. So first question was about, what is it?
Net reduction.
Net reduction, use, then parking, and then how people get to the median station. So in terms of net reduction, DOT did a variety of models as part of the study. 29 is more or less at capacity, or at least it's forecasted to be. It doesn't have much more ceiling to work with. So I think in their 2035 model, it showed overall vehicle volumes maybe slightly higher, but not that much higher because it's already kind of maxed out. And that's not going to change. There's no real. It's like they're going to make interchanges everywhere to increase the capacity. So it's kind of maxed out where it is. This will obviously add just a lot more people throughput to the corridor because the bus will be a lot more reliable and efficient. It would just move more people than current buses can. That's the first one. As for parking, it's really easy to think of the corridor in two parts. There's the sort of wide open highway part north of White Oak, and then there's a more closer in part, White Oak on into downtown Silver Spring. So north of White Oak, there's already a few parking rides up there. You got Tech Road parking ride, very shady parking ride. I think there's also one behind Burnsville Crossing. That's where 3 existing flash stations are right now, and this would stop at those same stations. So again, we didn't really propose anything up there north of Tech because we figured that's not really where the challenge is. So there may be some changes to that northern portion of the corridor as this gets looked at more deeply. But for now, I think almost every station up there outside of White Oak has some kind of parking near it. And hopefully there's some kind of transit-oriented development there eventually at those northern stations. Again, southern part of the corridor, it just thought that people walk to it. That's how folks get to the buses there now. The road network around each of the stops is relatively decent for walking to it in terms of connectivity, things like that. The Burnt Mill stop would be right by Trader Joe's. Four Corners, of course, will be right there in the intersection. And then there'll be one at Franklin Avenue, too. Just a little bit to be determined, but there will likely be one at Franklin. All those stops are pretty close to housing and stuff, and relatively short walk for a lot of people. So that's to answer that question. As for how folks get to the station, so they would use a crosswalk, just like into the bus today. This is one of the trade-offs that I wish didn't have to happen, but work with tight space, that's what we have to do. It'd be cool if there was somehow bridge or tunnel access to the median stops. Maybe something to look at in detailed design. I don't think so, just because of the cost, complexity of it. So the way people would access is just using a crosswalk. A lot of BRT systems in the U.S. do it this way. I rode one last summer in Utah, median stations the whole way, similar road Route 29, just crosswalk access. It's not ideal, but there is an ideal. Either way, you're crossing the street. And if you take the bus today, and you come home, you live over there with the bus stop there, you got to cross all 8 lanes right now. At least just narrows it a bit. So yeah, that's one of the trade-offs. Maybe they'll look at some other way of access, but I think it's very likely to be crosswalks at those southern stations.
I apologize if this question is a little broad, but I remember when engaging on the Thrive debate, I read a lot about building world-class transit. And since you made a comparison to Utah, how would you say, assuming the thing gets built out as you envision as best as it can be, how would you say the BRT the county is envisioning really does stand up to some of the best BRT
Questions in the country and internationally. I think it's best to compare within the U.S. There's a lot of great systems in Latin America, but they are almost way more like what we think of as metro. Very robust, super long vehicles, things that just would not be street legal in America. So those are kind of in a league of their own, all the international examples.
Could you, I'm sorry, since street legal, what do you mean?
Oh, just like, so for example, I think the longest a road vehicle can be here is about 60 feet on an articulated bus. There are some exceptions to that, but they're rare. In Latin America, they'll have like a 120-foot long bus, which is just not really allowed here because it can't make turns. But again, down there, those things run on such an exclusive network that's more like a metro system where they never even touch other traffic, so they can do that, right? It's more like a train on tires in those areas. So to me, those aren't the best BRT comparisons for thinking of it in like an American context. There are some pretty good systems around the country. The one I rode in Utah was in Provo. That one was pretty good, mostly dedicated lanes. Eugene, Oregon, which is near Portland, has one of the earliest like gold standard BRT systems in the U.S. Theirs has been around for at least a decade. Again, mostly median lane, but it has dedicated lane of various kinds, sometimes on the curb, sometimes median. It goes all around their cities. So if this gets built, this would be a lot like Eugene. It'd be pretty high quality. Again, when it goes into downtown Silver Spring, there might be an option to do a curb lane, bus lane. Again, we didn't really focus as much on that very southern part of the corridor. But it could stand up very well to other U.S. BRT systems in terms of dedicated lanes and the amount of it and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah.
idea I just had about why that is. And my theory about this is that the root cause is trying to make it too BRT-like and find something that you can call a BRT when it doesn't have dedicated lane. And specifically, it's the off-board fare payment. Because the Metro bus on that route does not have off-board fare payment.
Right.
So the consequence of having it to have off-board fare payment was that you couldn't have them at the same, people couldn't take whichever bus comes first, which is what lots and lots of people on that route want to do.
Right.
Because the one bus you have to pay in advance and the other bus you pay on the bus. And then beyond that, in order to avoid confusion about that they give them separate stops, so you certainly can't take whichever bus comes first.
I think that's more of it. I think it's a separate stops. You know, just flash, it'll stop 120 feet away from the Z8 or Z6, but it's not the same platform. So I think it's a big part of it. You have to like kind of pick or choose which one you're going to take before you even get there. So that's
What I'm
probably a big
thinking
part.
is that the reason they have to have separate stops is that they have separate fare payment systems.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I actually designed this median lane with the idea that local buses could merge into it and serve the same platform, then merge out of it and continue as a local bus, you know, south and north of the intersection in that main part right there. Again, we'll see if that becomes operational or DOT keeps that part in, but that was part of my original thought was if all the buses, because that's why it has right side doors, not median. I didn't do it on the left side because regular buses have right side doors. So each platform is served by a bus with right side doors. So I thought I'm going to do it that way just in case there's a way to work in the local buses. Because I agree, it's way easier. The stops are all the same.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
To follow up on Ben's point, Ben, I think, is looking at this like I like to see analysis done, which is a load analysis. In other words, you're actually loading the design and seeing how it works, and if it works, actually having somebody walk through it. And I see the same problem on bicycle lane developments. The plans are taken, copied and pasted from the planning book onto the street, and no thought is given to actually conveying somebody through it from different directions. And so that's really, I think, an insightful point, but how people encounter the bus stops and the use of the transit. So, I think it's powerful stuff, and I think that we need to, walk through the designs, more in the
The
process.
rider experience matters a lot.
I'm sorry?
The rider experience matters a lot.
I think it's prime.
How it actually works.
I think it's key.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're doing. It's what we're in business for.
Yeah, so I try to keep that in mind when I drew this.
Yeah.
It's a great way to do it. So I looked a lot doing it in the curb lane, bus lane. Those have all sorts of their own problems, right? Delivery trucks, just traffic backing up to on beltway ramps is a big issue here in Four Corners, which is why pretty early on I threw out the idea of keeping it on the curb.
Well, again, it's just the idea of, once you have a design, testing it mentally or in a practical way.
Yeah.
The corridor, I'm frustrated with your schedule, as you are, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we could get a design build competition in, and maybe the design build would enable a little faster pace, but a competition would allow firms to compete based upon the pedestrian enhancements they can put into the package that have been talked about earlier that are not in the package.
It'd be great. We do have a new county council, so maybe they'd be interested in something like that. I think that'd be part of the advocacy push over the next 18 months or less would be how do we get this funded, how can we package it so it gets funded. I think the next key goal, benchmark, would be just getting some amount of construction funding that fiscal year 25 to 30 CIP. Even if it's in like the later years, that alone would really just help the progress a lot. And yeah, if there's creative ways to speed it up, I'm all ears.
Well, and Sean, I just want to congratulate you, but I think that this project and all the people in this room that have contributed to it, someone, frankly of your age and coming out of college, engaging in this and having such a powerful influence of success, this can be a documentary. Of public engagement.
I don't know if my parents are watching.
And it would be very powerful for our advocacy as well as a good narrative on what you've done.
Any documentary filmmakers? No, I appreciate that, Richard. Thank you. That's very nice. Maybe. We'll wait till it gets built. How about that? Anyone else?
So it was a slightly parochial question, but I have a wife that works up at the applied physics lab, so it's always interesting in Howard Park. How robust do you think that's going to be? Like, is it actually moving? And do you have any larger thoughts on what we'll do for ridership?
Yeah, questions about will the Howard County Park manifest, and if it does, when it does, how that affect ridership and just the whole thing. I think it'd be really beneficial. There are a lot of folks in eastern Montgomery County who go up to Howard County. I used to go to Columbia Mall growing up from time to time. It's like the nicest mall nearby. So I think it'd be really beneficial to extend actual transit over Rocky Gorge. I know there's commuter buses that run, inbound in the morning. To me, that's not that great. It's almost not really transit. If it's so not usable outside of a very, it's more like a shuttle, right? Because it's very narrow who can use it and why. I think it'd be really beneficial for the whole corridor. I think it would really help with ridership. Even Maple Lawn, just on 216 there, 29, first part of Howard County. Even that's just blown up in the past 15 years. It's huge. Or not Skaggsville, it's small. And then Columbia itself, of course, is a huge population center, destination, and that's where it would terminate if it went up there. Somewhere near the mall or Maryville Post. I think it'd just be nothing but good. And hopefully, they can figure out the service pattern. It would be a pretty long run from Columbia to Silver Spring. But, if there's dedicated lanes, it's more reliable, so you don't have to worry as much about getting way off schedule, off headway. So I think it's definitely doable, and I hope it happens as soon as it can. Anyone else? There you go.
Gentleman right here.
There you go. Answer.
What is ridership? And because I can't find it, so I don't know how many. I know, how many people I see. But I don't know what ridership is, and is it how much lower than expected?
Right now, I'm not sure the most recent Flash ridership numbers, which I'm not sure if they offer much insight into what ridership is to get anyway. Because Flash really was a replacement for a route called the Z11, which is just an existing Metrobus Express service that was discontinued when this started. But it's kind of the same pattern. So I'm not sure about the current numbers. I know DOT made some projections about ridership in their study. I think they were decent. I don't put that much weight into ridership projections. To me, it's more about improving the line that's there for the people who already use it, and everything else is just great, right? I don't really use the word choice riders. I don't hate it, but there's some planners and electeds will say, we want to attract choice riders to the system. That's good. That's good, but you want to make it good for those who are just using it right now, right? It's like to me, it's almost like repaving a road. Like it should just be done because it's there. Like it's not like you should make an argument for it. That's kind of how I view just improving bus service. Like it's just kind of, it should be the default, and whatever it grows is great. If we get transit-oriented development out of it, it's awesome. Hope it does. Extended to Howard County is great. But that's why, to me, ridership numbers are always a bit, a lot of them depend on proposed land use that may or may not get built out. There are other things not considered. Like, I don't even know if they looked at the influence of Howard County ridership if this were to happen, because that whole Howard County stuff is a relatively recent development. So yeah, to me, the ridership numbers, they can have a role, but I don't put too much weight into them.
Were they expected to be the wide open finished?
Yeah, just a big gravel pit. That's the Anyone else, you go ahead and ask. Tina.
I think this might be similar to the question you just answered, but how, once the BRT is traveling in dedicated lanes and the roadways are pretty much at capacity like they are today, would you have any sense, or have you seen any projects that have been built about how many people say, screw riding in this car, I'm going to get on that BRT and play on my phone to go downtown because it's going to get me there faster? How much of a shift? That's kind of my question.
Yeah, it definitely happened. I think a big part of transit ridership is the land use at one or both ends, right? So, like if you're coming from, like an area that's very car dependent, not easy to walk around, but say your work or whatever your destination is in a place like downtown Silver Spring where it's easy to get to by transit. So that makes like a park and ride person, right? You drive a couple miles to the park and ride, you then ride it to the, and the same can be true vice versa. It's not as common, but if you say you live in a really dense walkable place like downtown Silver Spring or whatever, and maybe you take it out to Burtonsville and there's like a bus you transfer to, again, less common. Ideally, both their origin and destination are just walkable areas with good urban fabric, where it just feels natural to take transit there, just like it does to take Metro to Columbia Heights. It sort of feels like a natural thing to do because you have Metro and everything's right there. Or Gallery Place, or insert downtown DC station. That's kind of the idea. You just want either and everywhere around the stations should be as walkable and well connected and inviting as it should be. And it would just make taking transit to be the natural thing. That's kind of the ideal. Anyone else? Go ahead and
Have you given some thought to why is it that MCDOT couldn't come up with a solution, but you did? Now, I'm asking you not to ridicule an agency, right? But you have been in the system, you've been outside the system. You innovated while outside the system, you went back into the system. What insight do you have from all that experience that tells you how do you fix it so that we are either able to produce outcomes such as this organically from the agency, or have systems in place that allow, members of public such as you to make a more to make a more significant contribution? That's the sort of, it's a governance question, if you will, of what institution structure.
Really glad you asked that. I could talk for an hour on this, but I won't. Put it as brief as I can. I mean, to give the most credit to MCDOT as I can. I think a lot of folks who work there, know that something like this is best practice. They just know that this is doable, it makes sense. Again, it's a lot of the best BRTs in the US have the median set up just kind of like how I drew it. That's why I used to inspire it. So they know it's best practice, they know it's the right thing to do. I think the real issue is that, and I was talking to my dad about this over here, a lot of executive branch agencies act like they need to get the level of feedback that the legislature needs to get, right? I mean, it's called the executive branch, you execute, right? Like when, MCDOT runs snowplows, right? They never do like a public hearing on whether to buy like Mack or Peterbilt for snowplows. Like, they just don't, right? It's just a decision that just gets made because the council already said, let's do snow removal, buy some snowplows, okay, got it. I view transit planning, it should be like that. It's not, right? It's, let's create a whole corridor advisory committee. Let's create a platform for people who hate doing pretty much anything to just yell at us each night. And let's also prolong it so that the elected officials not only get, comments critiquing it, but they get sustained critiquing comments over the course of years rather than making it happen quickly. I think those are the main factors why, an agency like DOT, or this could apply to other ones too, why they don't act on what they know would just be the correct thing to do. Is because I think frankly, there's too much public feedback at the wrong times. The time for public feedback was before 2013, when the council passed the whole BRT master plan, right? Because back then the council said, this is our vision for, all these corridors around the county to have really high quality, robust BRT. So as far as I'm concerned, in 2013, the legislature already decided this is our vision for these corridors in the county going forward. So why then in 2015, 2016 is MCDOT essentially hosting a will we or won't we forum with a bunch of people who don't, I mean, this got decided years ago. Why is it being, why are we reinventing the wheel? I think that's why that stuff doesn't happen. A lot of people at DOT are good, they know what to do. They just don't act because it's political reasons like that and this kind of self-sabotaging form of system that they currently have set up. And how does that get changed? I don't know. I think I worked for the council and the state. I think a lot of it could be legislation, right? Like I don't think an agency like DOT should create advisory committees. Again, if you're executing, why are you seeking advice? That's more of a lawmaker thing to do. That's upstream from you as an agency. So I think, there should just be some reform in how do we do the public process. Many of these rules exist for good reasons, right? Highways through cities, all that bad stuff led to a lot of these rules that now get used to to prevent transit from happening.
You know, say it again. You said that fast. Say that again.
Sorry, yeah. So a lot of the rules that govern what I would think of as excessive public input throughout the whole process, right? Basically, up until there's a shovel in the ground, you still get to say don't do it, right? A lot of those laws were passed in the 60s and 70s. I mean, the main one is NEPA, but there's other local equivalents because of bad decisions that were made to build highways through cities, things like that. So they're an effort to prevent bad engineering and planning decisions from getting ran through, right? But the problem is that now they're just used to block everything. I mean, why isn't the purple line running yet? Because of that. Why did it take abandon all them 30 years? Because of that. So I think if that could be reformed, that would do a lot of benefit towards making things happen quicker. And again, you have public input. It's just it should be during the legislative process, not the executive process.
Well, can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
I agree with your experience and what you've just expressed here because you're right in it. So you have that best perspective on it. And it's also a matter of a equity issue because the public that is engaged or that is enabled to engage are privileged.
Yeah.
And to have a process that is so prolonged for public engagement is a way of excluding the broader public.
Yeah.
It's a subtle way of doing it, but that's what it does. And so we can get a more robust, a more higher quality, a more equitable engagement if we do reform the system. So that's one of the other benefits of reform. Not only that we can take the roadblocks out, but we can have a higher quality product from more equitable public involvement.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I was at a lot of these meetings over the years, and even the people who show up and talk are just a very small slice of the overall demographic of the corridor or the given area.
You mean the choice rider?
Yeah, the choice attendees.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else? I think we're getting ready to wrap up. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Sean?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, this is a good thing to end on. Do you have a sense of whether the other BRT plans are using your methodology, have learned from this experience to?
They have. The Route 55 BRT line, which is spanning all the way from Bethesda to Clarksburg, but the first part we're looking at is more or less Gaithersburg to kind of White Flint, North Bethesda. White Flint to Gaithersburg. That does have a lot of things that look just like this. Median lane for a lot of it. And I like to think that they were inspired by my idea, but again, it is best practice. Like everything I did shouldn't have been necessary, right? It was kind of like a rescue mission for someone who went swimming in a hurricane. I shouldn't have had to do all that. It's a harrowing story now that's over, but again, it was best practice all along to do it this way. That's why they didn't change it. I mean, that's why it's
Maybe you've emboldened them to do it.
Maybe. Again, 355 is kind of a different corridor. There's a lot more to work with, but yeah, the 355. If you look at their drawings, they look a lot like that. So they have gotten it right over there. Again, that one's moved along. It'll probably happen before this, but it's gonna take a while. There's a lot of work to do there. So again, they have gotten it right, but in this case, it's more about just kind of drowning out or getting past all the opposition voices who were just convinced it wasn't possible, and just kind of in a realistic way showing that it was possible.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean, for many of the things. First of all, for drawing the
Yes.
median roadway, and thank you for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and please come back next time.